Hello, everyone. Nice to see you guys. My name is Tamika Marshall. I've currently taught third grade, but I will be moving into EL support with first and second grade this coming school year. I am at Norman Binkley and have been so for the past 14 years.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Basil Lavecchio. I teach at Norman Binkley and I teach third grade. I have been teaching for 4 years, but I've been at Norman Binkley for 3.
I'm Melissa Phillips and I teach at Creve Hall Elementary. I just finished my 26th year, and 20 of those years have been at Creve Hall in 4th grade.
Hi, I am Patty Drexler. I am a teacher at Creve Hall Elementary. This will just be my 2nd year at Creve Hall teaching 2nd grade. In my 20 years of experience, though, all my other years were in the private school setting.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for being willing to help us better understand data-driven cultures. So our first question is, how would you describe the culture at your current school?
So at Norman Binkley, I think that in looking at the administration, it is apparent that our school is data-driven. My principal is kind of known as, the data guy. So that identity really kind of ripples out into the faculty so that we understand that this is something that's, valued at the leadership level. And, there's always things being done in creating conditions to create that culture.
Teachers definitely feel valued for our job, even though that may not always be reflected in the pay that we get. We definitely feel valued by our administrator, and not just in the fact that we're teachers, valued in our job as teachers, but valued as people. The culture in our school is one that promotes that every child comes and feels safe, and that every child comes and feels very loved, and every child feels valued as well. And I love how that's modeled from top down. And then it was very apparent as soon as he started working in our school that it was important to understand every component of a child and every piece of data for a child. And so that is something that we have really found, if we're going to make a difference in the kids, if we're going to try to promote growth, because at our school historically achievement has been really good, our growth has been just dismal, to be honest with you. And so to be able to recognize not just academic data, but like Tamika said, we've got to also understand their emotional data and the things that they're bringing to school that aren't measured in a test. So all of that has been really important in creating a culture at our school that the whole child is important, that the whole teacher is important, and that we definitely all understand that we're in this together.
What role has leadership played in developing the cultures at your school?
So I would say leadership has done a lot to develop culture in our school. And mainly, I think that comes from relationships with teachers. So I would say my relationship with admin is pretty strong. Like, they know who I am, not only as an educator, but as a person. And I think just by those relationships being formed, we've been able to, like, that sort of builds this like community and this family sense. And then beyond just the admin teacher relationship, I think they really emphasize team relationships. And so they develop teams that are really dynamic and have lots of different personalities with strong leadership, so that at the team level, we're really cohesive, which I think then trickles down into a relationship with kids. And so if they're seeing these high expectations for relationships, I think it just helps set our culture up really well.
Yes, and I would have to agree. At Creve Hall, we have a very similar dynamics where the administrators it's very important that they get to know us as people, not just as teachers and how we are going to work with the students in the classroom, but just to know us personally and who we are outside of school.
What do you believe has to be in place prior to creating that strong, positive school culture that y'all have at Creve Hall and Norman Binkley?
So I think relationships with students is like the most important factor, because when we're talking about a strong data culture, we cannot exempt the students from that culture. So we do have student data notebooks and folders, and we do have student data conferences one-on-one with kids. So, I mean, that culture is based on student data. So we're not information hoarding. We're not just sharing this information amongst ourselves as teachers and coaches and talking about these children and their potential and their performance, but we're talking to them as well. So they absolutely have to be they are the most critical piece of the puzzle. And in sitting down and having data conversations with students, that's where the culture is built.
And I think another key important thing to having a really good culture is that all personnel at school have to be in on this, that this cannot be held to just the classroom teacher to be responsible for this, that we have to have a complete buy-in of every single adult that comes in and out of that building, from your related arts teacher to your parapros. We can't have people that are saying, you know, this isn't in my job description, because I think our job descriptions have to be open up enough to know that we are all teachers and educators, coaches, cheerleaders, encouragers, counselors, nurses to all of these students. And so that's got to be part of the culture that we create, is that it's not just the classroom teacher responsible for that one child. And then also creating a buy-in for these parents to understand and educate them to what data is. But how are we going to get these kids educated enough that they can buy into their growth and to their data and communicate that to their families? I mean, what a powerful tool that is to create a culture where the student is the one who owns that data and that growth and can communicate that to the parents, and the parents are completely buying in and supporting the teacher and coming alongside the teachers to help to be able to implement what we're trying to do and to create growth mindsets for all of our students.
Can maybe y'all go into some more specifics of maybe one or two examples of what that strong data culture looks like at Norman Binkley and Creve Hall?
Intervention time, we've kind of used that time to make small groups so that the small groups can talk to an adult about kind of their data and track it as they go. So one thing we did this year, we set goals, but then we looked at what students needed to be doing tangibly each week in order to meet their goal. And so that looked like, how many iReady lessons are they doing a week? How many AR points are they getting a week? And so by us kind of keeping them accountable throughout the weeks leading up to those tests, I think it really helps students reflect on what helps me achieve the score that I'm looking for, the growth that I'm looking for. And I think that was huge for our kids, because when they walked into that test, it wasn't the first time they were ever thinking about, oh, what did I do to prepare for this? They already felt confident in themselves walking in. And so I think we saw a lot more growth because they were actively kind of working towards their goal.
Being new to Creve Hall this year, my experience with really such a data-driven school, I had very little experience in that. And so, you know, for me, it was you know, a new experience, a very eye-opening. I had a lot to learn from, but from the very beginning, it was very apparent to me that, you know, it started with the administrators, and then, you know, guidelines were set, and I knew that, you know, data was very important, but not just that I was on my own to figure it out, but that it was all the teachers were on board.
And y'all all having worked under more than one administration, I'm curious to know, what would you caution principals to not do if they desire to create a strong data culture at their school?
Well, I would definitely say to not focus on achievement data alone, because what that does is create almost, I don't want to say a weaponized accountability, but it's an angst that kind of comes with the data, and then when you tie it to accountability, and then everything is achievement data. There's tons of other kind of data, and Melissa has alluded to it several times. There's, you know, attendance data. You know, what a great idea would it be for your whole school, you know, to have a PD led by a guidance counselor to say, you know, who's absent and why. Like, the whole school should know that, you know, I don't know, Thursdays, you know, 16% of fourth graders are absent. Why is that happening? Is it an infrastructure problem with buses, or is it something else going on? Like, that is important information.
I would also caution against, you know, maybe assuming all teachers understand everything there is to understand about MAP and TLA. And while MAP is such a great tool and it does spit out a great response, I think it's hard for us, even as long as I've taught, to really use that as a diagnosing tool. I don't always understand like how to break that down into micro skills and to use that to help me to become a better teacher. I know this is not a caution against thing, but also we've got to help our teachers become more transparent and more vulnerable to be open to asking for help and how to work through when we're not seeing the growth that we want to. And I love that we can have a principal to come alongside us when we see our kids crash and burn on MAP. I mean, because we all take it personal. We all want our students to grow. We sit there, I am like literally on my phone that night waiting for the midnight clock so that I can see the MAP data pop up. And when it doesn't happen, I take it personal. And for principals, they need to be sensitive enough that we are all wanting this, and to how to come along and support the teachers when they don't see that growth. But sometimes what do? It's like trying to solve just an enigma, not knowing what to do. What we always say is like, it feels like the target is always moving, helping a teacher to come up, okay, let's tunnel our vision into this one area instead of trying to hit all the moving targets. Those are just some things that come to mind that have helped me, that has helped our school, I think, personally have helped me. And again, this is not a caution against, but recognizing there are teachers in our building, and I think that's something Nate has worked really well with, is we've got to have an open door policy in our classrooms where we're allowing our teachers to come in and observe us and not be afraid of that. We've got to be vulnerable enough that and also brave enough to just say, okay, well, Patty killed it in math. And so she's clearly doing something, and Patty's got to be willing to say, well, I did, maybe it was this. And my door is open for these people to come in and see what I'm doing. And I think we've all got to be brave enough to have that mindset of, I'm a teacher and I'm really good at something, or I'm a teacher and I am bombing this. Who in this building is killing it so I can go learn from them?
I think those are all so valuable. And I would just add on that you brought up a really good point about how teachers put a lot of stress on themselves to perform. And I think it's really important that it's known to teachers from their admin that they're not expected to perform always, or not that they're not expected to perform, but that it's not a reflection on who they are. And I think one of the most valuable experiences I've had at Norman Binkley was when my data wasn't where I expected it to be. I think my relationship with my principal, because it was so strong, he knew exactly what I needed in that moment. Because I think it's really easy to have this tendency to say, my data is wrong, I'm a bad teacher, I'm putting all this shame on me. And I think that's what some teachers are doing. And if your admin knows you well enough and has that relationship, I think it's a really great place for them to speak into and say, hey, it's okay if your data is not perfect. Like, I don't expect that from you. We're talking about children who are taking assessments. And so, they're not always going to perform the best way that you expect them to because, they're a bad tester or they're having a bad day. And so I think there's just a lot of grace that needs to be offered with data. But I also think when there's a strong enough relationship there can be a really great place to push into when you need to say, hey, we need to have a difficult conversation about why your data's been consistently, not as high as we would have expected, or your growth scores are down. And so when that relationship is there, it makes it really easy, I think, for admin to kind of come and sit down and brainstorm ways to kind of wake that teacher up to things that maybe they could be doing better. And I think that leads into my next point of, I think once we establish culture of looking at data and being informed by data, the most powerful thing we can do with that data is to grow from it. And so I'm not going to look at data and then leave it on the table if I actually believe in what the data is telling me. If I am a strong believer of what this data can inform me, I want to grow from it. And so I loved your point about how we need to ask teachers who are doing things really well to call on other teachers to come and join them and join in what they're doing, because I think we need to learn from one another and collaborate. And I think that's how we can get maybe teachers who didn't perform as well into classrooms that are performing well. And so we're sharing a wealth of knowledge and we're growing so that that data doesn't feel stagnant. And it doesn't feel like something we're just going to look at and say, great, and move forward. But how can we use it to inform my practice? And then it becomes way more meaningful for me, and therefore I'm going to use it. So I think that would be my advice.
Yes, I mean, I'd have to agree with all of that. That's all what I'm feeling as well. I think just to add two quick little things, I think like we've been saying, the ultimate is that the administrators just have a comfortable relationship with their teachers, that they feel like just a personal relationship, so that they can communicate freely and, you know, without feeling you know, like there's going to be any negative consequence or anything to the fact that teachers need to be able to say, yes, I do realize I didn't do as well as, or that the students didn't do as well, but to not take it personally and to just build off of that and to see what might need to be done just to help the kids pull up their scores the next time. Because I think the biggest negative thing that can come out of that is that teachers will lose their passion for teaching and why they want to do it in the first place. It would be really easy for administrators to, you know, want to show test scores, kind of compare test scores, make test scores available for people to see. And I know for me to have your name attached to scores that other teachers would be able to view is hard. I think that for me personally, I know if I see my scores and I didn't do quite as well, and I see everyone else's scores, and you know, I want it to make me want to work harder to pull those scores up with my kids. But at the same time, I would take it personally, thinking the other teachers are looking at me maybe in a negative way, that I'm not that strong of a teacher. It could have just been a horrible test day, or I could be struggling as a teacher. But I think it tends to maybe develop this kind of negative competition among teachers that principals might not see.
I was going to add something what Stephanie said about not leaving the data on the table. Something I would caution administrators about is not to rob so much time from teachers that we don't have the time to really dive into it. It takes time to really put a diagnostic work on the data that we've been given, and sometimes we'll get results, but we're moving on. And if it's going to be important to the school, the culture of our school, we've got to have the time given to us to really sit down and look at this and come up with some ways that we can either change practice, enhance our practice, or keep moving on with our practice.
And I know I already had my turn, but based on what you just said, Melissa, I cannot not say this. I'm talking directly to the principals right now who are going to see this. If you are a principal and you have been in your office for 6 hours looking at your KPIs, do not drop that in front of a teacher and ask him or her to give you a snapshot analysis in a matter of seconds about something that you've already digested for hours beforehand. It's not fair. You know, and it creates a lot of anxiety for somebody who knows already, you know, the ins and outs of something that they're putting in front of you, and then they're asking you to turn and talk about what? I don't even know what this is. I don't know what to talk about. Like, so I'm going to just start talking about something else, like what the kids do, because they don't know what you're talking about.